Welcome to the Voice of One Crying in the Wilderness. This ministry is founded on Mark chapter 1 and verse 3. The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord and make its path straight. After seeking the Lord in prayer, our name was given to us by the Lord. And we invite you to like us on Facebook, The Voice Crying in the Wilderness, where you could download all our messages or email us at avoiceofonecrying@gmail.com and request a message to be emailed. However, you must know your speaker's name and the date that they spoke. This evening, our speaker is Brother Alan Kennedy, and we do have him on the call, and we would turn the call right over to him to give us our evening prayer and our evening devotion. Brother Kennedy, the time is now yours.
Well, thank you. Good evening, one and all. I just walked in the door, and I'm soaking wet. That's what happens when you live in the South and it's summertime. But that's all right. I'm glad to be able to work. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear Father, we come to you this evening in need of enlightenment from you. We look to you for your blessing, your word to us, and may we be open to it and incorporate it in our lives. May we all be found ready, waiting when Jesus comes to take us home, for it's in his name we pray, amen. This evening I'd like to talk about something a little bit different than country living, although I guess I ought to talk for a little bit about what I'm wanting to do. I am for years, probably 7 or 8, 9, 10 years, I've done seminars about living in the country, growing, mineralizing and balancing soil, and all sorts of different things, year-round growing. And I decided that rather than just talk about it, I wanted to do it. But I didn't want to just do it. I wanted to be able to demonstrate to people who do not know, who are coming from the city, who have not lived in the country, what they can do to make money. Unfortunately, in our world, it takes money to live. And while some of us have some money coming in month to month, I think if we're wise, we'll recognize the fact that there will come months in the future when that dries up, and we've been given the counsel to be on a small plot of ground where we can grow what we want to eat. So with that in mind, I'm very much a proponent of living in the country. However, you can raise about 4 tons of food on a spot that's 12 by 36 feet in rectangle. So you can raise all the food you, your family, and anybody else around you would need if you have the skills and if you know what you're doing. Now, those are 2 pretty big ifs. I was down in the market down in Delano, and one of my friends, Conrad, I said, Conrad, I do these seminars, and people think that they can get one of these number 10 cans full of vegetable seeds, and when the time comes, they go outside and scratch the ground and put some seeds in it, and they'll eat off of it. And he started grinning from one ear to the other. I said, of course, you and I both know that's wrong. He grinned and agreed. So I guess what I'm saying is I am a proponent not only of people living in the country, not only of people raising what they eat, but them practicing it day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out. It's a lifestyle. Country people think differently than city people. They're in the country. you depend on neighbors and friends around you. In the city, you call the police or the fire department. Many times you don't even know your neighbors or have friends around you. So life is different in the country. When I broke my leg, I had to yell, help, 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 for an hour and a half before somebody who was drinking coffee out on their front porch heard me and came down and called 911. I'd called 911, but the antenna was broken on my phone when I sat down on a rock with it in my hip pocket. So life in the country is different than in the city. There are some advantages. If you need something, chances are one of your neighbors will know how or will be able to help you or whatever. So I would encourage anybody who wants to follow the call to live in the country to do whatever they need to do to be able to move to the country and begin that life. So, with that said, what I'd like to talk about for the next few minutes is the fact that I want to demonstrate how to make money living in the country. A couple of weeks ago, we were doing a Life Choices weekend, and the lady that was there said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to move back to Michigan. I said, well, why would you do that? She said, well, that's what my boys said. They said my support network is here, but I don't feel like I'm gaining any ground. I'm making a contribution. And I said, well, why don't you grow oyster mushrooms? That was a new thought to her, but quite frankly, on a space 20 by 35, you can grow $70,000 worth of oyster mushrooms in a year. You heat and cool it just like you do the heat and cooling that you live in, and it's pretty simple. Now, I would suggest that you really research it before you just dive in, but you can autoclave your straw in a 55-gallon barrel with some boiling water that you put the straw in, and then take it out and put it in some garbage bags, and then put those in plastic laundry hampers, put those on shelves, and after everything's cooled off and ready, you inoculate your straw with the spores, and you keep things going along, and then you start picking mushrooms. That really got her going. Both she and her husband, who struggle to find common ground, have done quite a bit of research on that, and it sounds like they're probably going to be growing some oyster mushrooms. I encourage them to identify a market, but usually your high-end restaurants will love to see good produce like that, so you don't usually have a problem. But let's talk about some other things. Last night, we were at the singing over at Tellico in the community, and one of the fellows walked up to me and he said, do you still have your big truck? And I said, well, yes. And he said, well, I have 3/4 of an acre of dry land rice, and once I harvest it, I'm going to need to take it to Delano and have it de-hulled, the hull taken off of it. And I was wondering if you'd take it down there. I said, well, sure. And I went back to him later and said, you know, I'd trade you hauling your rice for some of the rice because, and I didn't tell him this, but that's one of the crops that I'm looking to grow. And what I'm wanting to do is start a web presence for the various crops that I grow, because when you balance the nutrients, the minerals in the soil, the nutrients in whatever you raise will be between 3 and 5,250 or 60 times what it would be in produce without balanced soil. So if you know what you're doing, you can raise a lot higher nutrient density crops, and that is the next wave. The wave that we are experiencing right now is organic. And I would encourage you, don't get decoyed by all the labels, but you need to be eating non-GM, non-genetically modified produce, whatever it is. Now, let's see, what things are genetically modified? Commercial soybeans, commercial corn, and some of the garden corn is genetically modified, so you need to be careful. Those are the primary ones. But not only do you need to be eating non-genetically modified, but you need to be eating organic. The genetically modified things that are out there on the market mess with our DNA and cause our DNA sometimes to go haywire. That's what causes cancer, causes all sorts of health problems. And so I've helped a number of people who had conditions of fragile health. One man had served in Vietnam and had irritable bowel syndrome, and he was buying produce from me. In fact, he was buying two units every week, and that's all they were eating. One day he said to me, he says, you know, I've got irritable bowel syndrome, and I've been to several doctors, and they don't seem to be able to get me straightened out. And I said, well, do you want some help getting things straightened out? He said, oh, are you a doctor? I said, no, but I think I might be able to help you. And so we began outlining a program that he could follow, which included no genetically modified food, no non-organic food, a diet of whole food, as much fresh as possible, and raw sauerkraut. Raw sauerkraut, a quarter of a cup of raw sauerkraut contains as many probiotics as the whole bottle of probiotic capsules. What raw sauerkraut is, if you'll look at your label, when you see you bought sauerkraut, you'll find that it's been pasteurized, which means it's canned. Raw sauerkraut is sauerkraut that's been allowed to ferment and then jarred up, but that you don't heat it and you don't can it. You put it in the refrigerator and you keep using it till it's gone, so that the culture of probiotics, lactobacillus in particular in that, are alive and well. Because what happens when we eat a diet of genetically modified, well, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, there's enough glyphosate or Roundup in it that it will change the normal flora in our intestines. And Clostridium difficile, which when I went to lab school was not an issue, I knew what it was, but now people are getting their bowels overrun with Clostridium difficile, and that's what you hear. That's what it is when you hear people refer to people as having or dying from C. diff. That's what it is, Clostridium difficile. And to get away from that, you need to get off of a standard diet, including genetically modified stuff, and onto organic, and then you need to get probiotics to repopulate the bacteria in your gut with beneficials instead of things that are going to cause you grief. Monsanto will tell you that Roundup does not bother us because we do not have what is called the shikimate pathway for digestion, metabolism. And that's true. Mammals do not have it. But for every cell in our body, there are 10 bacteria and 100 viruses, and all of them have the shikimate pathway. So, and by the way, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but there is one cereal that has more Roundup or glyphosate in it than any other. The testing fellow by the name of Mike Adams, affectionately dubbed as the Health Ranger, has a lab and does a lot of testing. And right now he's found that there is lead in the children's probiotics, much of them which come from China. So you need to be very much aware of what you are putting in your mouth, because in his testing there was one cereal, and it happened to be my favorite. I would put granola with this cereal and eat it. And this cereal had more glyphosate or Roundup than any other. And that cereal is known as Cheerios. So be very careful what you're eating. And you say, well, oats, that's made out of oats. And oats is not genetically modified. No, you're right. It is not. Nor is wheat. But the farmers spray Roundup on their fields of grain to kill the grain evenly and plump the kernels so they have a higher weight harvest. And that's what they use, is Roundup to do it. So we need to know where our food is coming from, even if when they inspected the food coming across the southern border from Mexico, they turned away every truckload of produce that they inspected because it was contaminated. There is still the financial incentive to grow and ship produce into this country from Mexico. And the country of origin defines what organic is. My advice to you is you identify what organic is. If you don't grow it, you look at in your grower's eyes and you say, I only want organic. I don't want any funny stuff. I don't want any genetically modified stuff. What's the deal? And that's why you need to know who you're buying from, because organic, Whole Foods right now has some major problems as they represent food. They'll say it's natural. Natural doesn't mean squat. Every plant that grows food is natural. What you want is non-genetically modified and organic. Boy, I really took off a ways on that, but today we passed the field of dryland rice. My friend that talked to me last night is growing 3/4 of an acre. It doesn't require water. It just grows regularly out in the field, and they use no chemicals on it. So I'm going to start a website that has good produce on it. For instance, there's cornmeal, non-genetically modified corn. There's popcorn. There's the rice. There are all sorts of staples, and I understand from some of my Asian friends that the dryland rice is really wonderful rice to cook with and to eat. I enjoy it. So what I want to do on a farm, I wrote a booklet entitled Growing Money, and you can grow money by growing ornamental plants, grasses, ferns for the landscaping industry. In fact, you can probably make more money per square foot doing that than anything else. After that, you can raise fruit trees. Again, most of these involve rooting and cutting and grafting, and so you need to be familiar with those skills. But when you go over to McMinnville, Tennessee, and you pass mile after mile after mile of nursery stock, somebody's making a barrel of money because they've got nice tractors, they've got nice houses, airplanes, and whatever else. What else to grow? Well, what about reishi and shiitake mushrooms? Besides the oyster mushrooms, reishi are primarily used medicinally. Shiitake are really good tasting. What else? There is one type of ginseng that can be grown profitably. All the other types are grown in China, and you cannot compete with that market very well. But in China, they do not have the shade by the trees because the trees so many of them have been cut that they don't have that shade to grow wild simulated ginseng. So that's a type of ginseng that you can grow. Then there are apples. If we get this farm, we're talking about putting in at least an acre of apples. If you plant your trees on 20 by 20 spacing, you would get about 100 apple trees on an acre. Each apple tree, on average, produces 20 bushels of apples. So if you had 100 trees at 20 bushels, that's 2,000 bushels. And then if you multiplied it, say, by 15, you could easily get $15. That's $30,000 per acre. If you grow organic apples, which it's harder to do, but it can be done, the way you do it is you get your soil up to speed, you get your minerals balanced, and you spray beneficial biology on a regular basis. Those crops, organic fruit, sells after blossom, before apples are even formed in the orchard. And they will contract for every apple that's grown in that orchard. So, if you can get it going, it can be very profitable. So, let's see, what else? Well, there's paulownia, which is a soft wood that the Asian markets will pay anywhere from $9 to $11 per board foot. It will take you a number of years to get an acre of Paulownia up and of sufficient size to harvest. But you can make between $45,000 and $90,000 per acre. Well, you say, oh, that sounds pretty good. Well, you have, say, 10 acres, and you keep taking care of it, and then you harvest the last acre, however all that works. But there are other crops that will give you more return for your money. For instance, corn. Now, regular field corn is not going to pay you very much. And it's genetically modified, and you use Roundup on it, and I don't want anything to do with it. But you can, on the same ground, raise Indian corn, decorative corn, and you can make 3 times what you can with sweet corn by raising decorative corn. And then if you grow the small strawberry popcorns, you can double what you get there. And if you grow popcorn, there are some popcorns. Incidentally, if you have popcorn is really in demand by people who know, because all of regular corn has a 0.5% to 2% genetic modification because of wind drift, pollution. But popcorn does not. It is clean corn. So you can raise red, white, and blue popcorn, and you can grind it, and you can have cornmeal that's red, white, and blue, and that's clean. So those are some of the things that I would think about. Then I didn't mention to you, there's a crop that you have to rotate that the seed cloves cost $130,000 per acre, but you pull off over $1 million worth of garlic off of that acre. Now, I don't have $130,000 laying around, but I also know that when the wall, the Soviet bloc, was protected by before, came down, there were teams of individuals that went from village to village to buy up samples of the village garlic, because all the villages had their own varieties of garlic. And some of those varieties of garlic are gourmet garlic. They have special qualities. And if you'll look on the web, they are just like gourmet beans. There are some beans that you and I have never heard of. There are some that I've heard of, but there are some beans that will sell out before the harvest is even complete. Most of the really good gourmet garlic will sell out before it's ever dug. You order it, you pay for it, and then they'll send it to you when they dig it. So there are a number of crops that you can grow, trees, plants, various things. Another thing that you can grow, and again, all of this takes mineralized, balanced soil that's high in organic matter. Oh, let me tell you, when you do growing the way I'm talking about, it's called deep organic. The shallow organic is where you just buy the inputs that your crop needs and apply it and get a crop. Deep organic means that you use and feed and protect the beneficial microorganisms in the soil. Those are the things that bring the minerals into your produce and give it the flavor, the pest resistance, and some of those things. And what they found after Chernobyl, they found that the dairy farms that were farming in a deep organic way, using cover crops, green manure crops, animal manures, their cheese, their milk was free of radiation that the other cows on shallow organic or commercial farms had in their milk and their cheese. So the Lord has provided, if we use the methods that He has given us, and in a deep organic system, a growing system, once you establish that fertility reservoir, it will be good for 20 or 30 years. I used to wonder, what are you going to do for fertilizer during the time of trouble? Not to worry. If you do it right, you're going to have a fertility reservoir that will take you right on through. And everything you grow has higher nutrient density. It tastes better. It will sell better, and you will be better for it because it's a whole lot better produce. For instance, right now, you would have to eat 26 apples to get the same iron that was contained in an apple back in the 70s. That's how depleted some of the minerals are, because every time you grow a crop and take it off soil, it depletes that soil of that signature set of minerals. And so we want to make sure that we have all the minerals, and we need to check it every 3 to 5 years and put whatever back that we have lost in the meantime, so that we're not raping the fertility of our soil. Jill and I, within the last 2 weeks, have been to 3 funerals, one on the outside, and then 2 in the communities, 2 in the community down in Delano. The first funeral was of a 35-year-old friend of mine. Some of the plain people won't talk to you. It's like normal life out here on the outside. Some people are very introspective, and they don't talk to strangers. But David was a different person. He was friendly. He was business, but he was very courteous, and he was very respectful and thoughtful. As I said, he was a friend of mine. Jill didn't know him so much. I even took him a soil report one day, knocked on his door, all the curtains were drawn, and I was wondering what in the world was happening. I kept knocking, and finally he came to the door and he said, "You know, I'm really interested in this, and I thank you for bringing it, but I just finished helping deliver our latest child, and I need to go get busy with that again." And I said, "Oh, that's a far higher priority than this soil report. If you have any questions, let me know." But about 4 weeks ago, he was driving a horse that was pulling a cart that had a compressor that was ground driven to spray some of his vegetables. Now, I don't know what he was spraying. I won't get into that. But the pressure gauge blew off and hit him in the jaw, broke his jaw, messed up his face, fractured his skull, they found out later, and he was airlifted to UT Hospital. I went and saw him the next day because I was working in Knoxville, and frankly, I wouldn't have recognized him if I hadn't seen his name on the door. His face was so swollen, he just looked totally different. They patched him up, and he was beginning to set. They wired his jaw, so he had to get his food through a straw. A week or 10 days later, when I went down to get the vegetables on Sabbath evening, I took a tub of sherbet to the family, and I said, I don't know what I can do to help you, but I figured this sherbet would cool you off. Everybody was very thankful. He was home. He was convalescing, and then he began to get disoriented and lose his balance. Finally, they took him back to the hospital. They began doing other tests, and what they found is when the thing had hit him in the mouth, it had fractured the bottom of his skull, and they hadn't noticed it at first. And his brain, because of the sloshing around in the skull, was swelling, and the swelling was coming out the brain stem down toward the spinal cord, and it was causing him to lose his bodily functions, quite frankly. The brethren decided, and his family decided to take him home. But as they were starting to take him out of the hospital, he passed on. They took him back and held the body several days, and then they had a funeral. Now, I guess I need to describe a Mennonite funeral for you, because if you've never seen one, you're missing out. All of the families, whether it's Missouri, Kentucky, various communities around here, all the members of the family come together, and they do not embalm the body. Here in Tennessee, you don't have to. They put the body on dry ice, and my friend is the undertaker, and he'll put a thermometer right on their chest, and usually the thermometer will hover right around 34 to 36 degrees, just above freezing them. And they make the casket. In David's case, his brother-in-law, Conrad, and Ivan, his friend, built the casket. Beautiful, out of wood. And then there's an open casket service. At David's funeral, Jill said, "Wow, there are a lot of people there." And the girl said, there were quite a few. And she said, "How many would you guess?" And Jill said, "Well, I would guess between 600 and 800. And the girl said, we counted, and there were 724 people there. So there were busloads of people and van loads of people that came. And yes, it's a sad time. It's a solemn time. The family, after there is a viewing the night before from 3 to 5. They have supper from 5 to 6, and then visitation again from 6 to 8. All the members of the family that are there sit in the big circle around the meeting room in the meeting house. and you go through and shake everybody's hand and talk to them, and then you're outside and people visit. A lot of people hadn't seen each other in months or whatever, many times since the last funeral. And then the morning of the funeral begins. The actual funeral begins about 9. The one we went to the other day began about 10 of 9. There were only 500 people or so at that one. It was Michael Smith, a friend of ours, because he was the closer at the market in Delano. So every Saturday afternoon, when the market closed, he would come downstairs and visit with us and talk with us. Again, many of the plain folk are very introspective. They don't have a whole lot to say. You would think that they were unfriendly, but Michael would stand around. He had been on the outside. Both of his parents were physicians. He was a wealthy young man. He went to Jimmy Swaggart's Bible college. He requested his parents, and they turned him down at first because they didn't have much Christianity in their family, and then they later said that he could go. And he was quite a Bible scholar. He had written a number of booklets on various books of the Bible, and he was finishing a booklet on the Song of Solomon, and very deep. What happens is they have 2 preachers that preach the funeral, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, and then there's the viewing of the body. The casket is taken outside, put on wooden sawhorses, and in these communities, the women sit on one side of the church and the men on the other, and then the women are go down one side of the casket to view it, the men on the other, and everybody files past. The family sits on the porch of the meeting house while this is all going on, and then the pallbearers take the body in the casket over to the grave site, followed by the family. It's placed on the ground, and then after the family is seated, the casket and body are lowered into the grave, and many of the young men, the peers of the deceased, take a shovel, and they'll throw a shovel or a shovel full or 2 onto the casket and cover the casket, and then that part is done. And in the meantime, there's a crew that's bringing out sandwiches, drink, and cookies to feed everybody. They have 4 lines, and they can feed those 800 people 800 people in about 35 or 45 minutes. So it's very organized, and it moves right along. And then after lunch, everybody visits a while, and then they break up and go visit other people in the community. Why do I bring this up? It's kind of a morbid topic to be talking about. You're absolutely right. But David had no idea that pressure gauge was going to come off that spray rig and hit him in the jaw fracture his skull, and that a month later he would be dead and buried. Then his wife is pregnant with their next child, and she was there with his 8 or 9 year old oldest son, Jairus, there at the head of the line for the family to go around visiting everybody and at the visitation. David had no idea. Dolores had no idea that at 32 or 3, in her prime, she would be a widow. David was an astute farmer. He was the son of the pastor up in Englewood, Noah Shetler, and his wife, the oldest son. And the brothers up in UT Hospital, one of his brothers' name is Junior, and I watched Junior get David to suck on some water to get some hydration into him. They're very familiar with nursing animals because they farm with horses. They have sheep and cows and goats and the various things. And I watched Junior and I marveled at the intuitiveness of his working with David to get him some water and get it in him and get him hydrated. But David had no idea that that was going to happen. He was conscious when I saw him at home and I talked to him and prayed for him. Michael was out in his garden looking at stuff in the field. He didn't grow up farming with horses. And this is new and strange and different. And his 12, 13, 14-year-old son went out to the field and found him dead in the field. Neither man knew that his time on earth was done and he was going to be called to give his life. My comment to many of the family was, it's easier to die for Christ than it is to live for Him. And so we all have the responsibility that we have to hold up of living for Him and doing what we know is right. I bring that up because none of us know the length of time that we have. We don't know what's going to happen. The little lady that I sit with had been sitting with for 7 or 8 months. Last Monday night, she and the sitter that was with her, went to her garage to get a battery charged on something so that she could continue to get her treatments. And 8 or 10 police cars came and 4 ambulances and adult protective services, and they didn't think she was in the appropriate setting, and they took her to the hospital, took her inside first. She couldn't care for herself, so they took her to the hospital. She was there for several days in the emergency room, and then she was discharged to a nursing home. She never wanted to be in a nursing home. She's wanting to get out. She wants me to come and take her out. Well, I can't provide care 24/7. And so I have told her that I'm willing to help her, but she's going to have more care than I can, as an individual, can give her. She's going to have the money to be able to afford to do what she wants to do. So none of us know from day to day and moment by moment what's going to happen to us. And my appeal to each one of us is to be aware of what's going on, to be committed to the Lord. The other morning in my devotions, I was reading Oswald Chambers. I read a book, a page every morning in his book, in the complete works of Oswald Chambers. And he was talking about the verse, "Search me, O God, search my heart and see if there be any wicked way in me." That's quite an invitation to have the Lord come in to our lives and look around to see if we are a fit vessel for Him to live in. But Chambers made the statement, and I totally agree, nobody's going to be saved if they have not been searched and clean and safe to save. So neither one of these men knew what was going to happen. They left family, but I trust by knowing them that both of them were ready. And may each of us be ready, day by day, moment by moment, whether we live in the country, whether we live in town. Incidentally, if you live in the city, this is my warning to you. I am hearing on YouTube and various media that the cities are death traps. We watched that in Katrina. The generals' wives told everyone about what the generals had been told. The generals had been told that if anything happens in a city, it's going to be shut down, isolated, and what happens there is just going to happen. I wondered about that for the longest time. And we have a friend who is the administrative assistant to the president of Coca-Cola Corporation in Atlanta. And one day in a seminar, I mentioned that we all need to be ready. She came up to me afterwards and she said, "We have had seminars presented by national experts on preparedness, and each one of us has been told to pack and place a packed suitcase in our trunk to be prepared to leave and not go home, but get out of the city, because once the city is sealed off, you may well die in the city." I don't want to be harsh and I don't want to be cruel, but there aren't going to be any suicide bombers out here in the country of Englewood, Tennessee. They're going to be in the city. They're going to be, the shootings are going to be in the cities. There are false flag events where the deep state is at war with Trump and his administration, because Trump is cleaning house on some rat nests that have been there, some of them over a century. And I don't know what you think of Trump. There are some things I would just as soon change about him, but I appreciate the work he's doing as president of these United States. And I appreciate what Ben Carson is doing as the director of HUD. We need some good people in office, and I think especially Ben Carson is the very best. So I think we need to be prepared, and part of that is we need a plan to get out of the city. My dedication is to be able to demonstrate to people what they can do to earn a living in the country. My usual go-to is you get in the country, you get your garden spot that's 20 by 40, 12 by 36, 20 by 40. You get it mineralized, balanced. You get the deep organic going on in there so that you can really raise good produce. And all you do is you add to that year by year. I just noticed a YouTube video, $350,000 by growing produce on an acre. I haven't watched it, but people can do it, and they are doing it. And so you begin to raise your own food, then you raise a little bit more, and you give some away to your friends. If you give it to them 3 or 4 times and they don't start paying you, you change to another friend and another friend until the friends that you have appreciate the produce that you're passing to them and pay you for it. And you begin to not only develop a skill and the knowledge of how to live in the country, but you begin to get paid for that skill and that knowledge of producing food. You need to start with the food that you need to be eating the most of. I don't know whether it's lettuce, whether it's oats, whatever it is, produce it. And then as you're able to eat, produce whatever you and your family can eat of that, go to the next thing and learn how to can, how to dehydrate, how to put up produce. There's a book, Stocking Up, that we bought years ago, still valid. All of those methods are still valid, and we need to know what to do. Yes, the Lord sent bread by the ravens, and He can, and I'm sure He will again. But He looks to us to be thoughtful stewards of His. He looks to us to gain knowledge, to take the advice that has been given and move out into the country. You remember what happened with Jerusalem. They were given advice that the army would disappear, and they were to leave Jerusalem when the army disappeared. And those that did, none of them lost their lives. We need to take the advice that we've been given seriously. We need to do something about it. We need to move out of our comfort zone. Some of us that are out here will help show you what you can do, how you can do it, and then you're going to be on a different path. Your life will slow down. You'll begin to look at plants as they grow, and you're going to recognize how generous a God we actually have. I think I've mentioned this before, but do you know how many kernels of corn are on the average stalk of corn? Now, that stalk takes one kernel to make a stalk. You plant it in the ground, and usually there will be 2 ears of corn. And the average ear of corn has between 400 and 600 kernels on it. So that's between 800 and 1,200 kernels between the 2 ears. Let's take an average. That's 1,000 to 1. I would scrape together the little money that I had if I could put it in the ground to get 1,000 times that out of it. And that's the way the Lord has designed agriculture for us, to benefit us. Not only us, but there's a lot of witness in good produce that you share with others. Amen. If I could ever help you, let me know. Let me give you contact information. A phone number is 423-888-8255. 572-1950. Address is Allen, Allan, Kennedy, Kennedy, P.O. Box, Post Office Box 54, Englewood, E-N-G-L-E Wood, Tennessee, 37329. Email address is allankennedy001@gmail.com. And again, if I can help you in any way, let me know. I'd love to help you see what you can do in the country. Take care and God bless.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm back. First of all, I would like to make a statement, and that is that the opinions expressed of such individuals, it is not endorsed by this ministry, and everyone have a right to their own opinion. I just want to share that because on this ministry call, we always ask our callers to, evaluate and not to just censor, but I just want to give that statement, clarity statement. So with that being said, Brother Kennedy did give his information, and we want to thank him for that. And we do need to be out the cities as much as we can, asking the Holy Spirit to guide us. So in closing, I would like to share that if you choose to hear this call again, you dial 712-775-7089 and use the same PIN code you used to come in. If you like a CD for any of our speakers with a $5 donation, you can send that to The Voice of One Crying in the Wilderness, P.O. Box 8441, Laverne, California, 91750, and that's -8441. Also, please make your checks or money orders payable to Vaughn Williams, and that is with a V, Vaughn. Also, continue to send in your prayer requests. We welcome each and every prayer request, and we do pray for these prayer requests. They're not just sent in. We do pray for them. And so with that, we ask if you would like to unite with us as we send a little stifle to our speakers. And we have over 30, maybe 40 speakers, and we may not have reached a few of them, but we try to go and how the Holy Spirit lead us. So we want to thank those that unite with us. We want to also thank you for your prayers. Thank you so much for your prayers. And I'm going to close out again. I just want to make it clear to our callers that any opinions that is expressed on this call, it is an individual, and it is not part of this ministry as a whole. We haven't endorsed anyone. So I'm closing out with, amid discord and strife, a voice was heard from the wilderness, a voice startling and stern, yet full of hope. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's taken from the Desire of Ages, page 104. Again, we want to thank Brother Kennedy for coming on the call. We want to thank all our callers, and even for those who come in for the playback. We thank you. We pray that you have a blessed evening. And I want to say our speaker tomorrow is Elder Greg Carey. I'm trying to make sure, but because I don't have the lineup right in front of me, yes, it's Elder Greg Carey tomorrow. Wednesday we have Brother Anthony James, and Thursday we have Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone, and goodbye. We have Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone. And goodbye. Pastor Michael Martin, and that is our lineup for the week. And have a good evening, everyone.